At a CNN town hall yesterday, President Biden advocated for moving teachers up on the vaccine priority list. Let's take a listen to that.
And so there's a lot of things we can do short of, and I think that we should be vaccinating teachers. We should move them up in the hierarchy as well.
So on the same day, Dr. Fauci actually said on CNN that while teachers are a priority, their vaccination should not be a barrier to reopening schools. Let's take a listen to what he said.
There are a number of things that people are asking for help and guidance of what can we do to make this more safe. And you saw them. There's masking, there's distancing, there's contact tracing, there's cleansing of the areas, but there's also vaccination of the teachers. Yeah. And I think that's important. And it's become clear that that's not a sine qua non. I mean, you can't say we're not going to open any schools unless all the teachers get vaccinated. It would be very helpful, and all of us are very empathetic and want the teachers to get vaccinated. They are a priority when it comes to essential personnel, but we think we can move forward as we vaccinate teachers, but it doesn't have to be that if they're not vaccinated, then you don't open the school. So I think hopefully that clarifies it a little bit.
So Democratic strategist, co-founder of Northern Star Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins, and co-host of the Real Line podcast, Marshall Kossoff. They're back to weigh in. Michael, let me start with you. It's an interesting situation. There's been burgeoning. There's a lot of culture war fights. We were just talking about that. Now we're back here. Some people who are more anti-union, they're going after teachers' unions on this particular issue. But the science does seem generally clear that you can reopen schools without widespread vaccinations of teachers, and they are not a major vector for transmission. So do you think that the Biden administration's general reluctance, at least to fully embrace the CDC guidance on this, is going to be a problem for them as Republicans continue to talk about the issue?
You know, I think the administration is going to continue to get hit on slowly opening schools. But look, if I was a teacher, I'm not showing up until I get a vaccine. Teachers are underpaid and overworked, and I understand their reluctance to go into schools where you have people who you don't know whether they're transmitting corona. And so I think while I understand Dr. Fauci's point, I think we have to look at the actual reality we're dealing with. And so where teachers have gotten vaccinated, I think they're going to go back in, but we've got to have a system in place to replace those teachers who haven't gotten vaccines yet. And part of that is speeding up and putting teachers on the front line.
Yeah. I mean, Marshall, I honestly think the public is more in line with where Biden and the team have been. Overall, the polling has been, they've been more cautious about sending kids back to school, even as we recognize that, number one, especially for the most vulnerable students, this has been it's been a disaster, frankly, having them out of school and trying to accomplish the same thing online is just not workable for some children, and they just don't have a stable environment to be able to pull that off. But I have this feeling like the right really wants to make this a thing with Biden and wants to be, he doesn't want us to open schools, whatever. He wants your kids to be at home, whatever. And it seems to me like they're being really careful to try to take this moderate view of no, we said you can reopen schools if you're taking these precautions. Not all the teachers have to be vaccinated. I'm not sure that he's giving the right all they're hoping for in this culture war debate.
Yeah, the key thing here, and this is the frustration that any thinking person is going to have during COVID-19, which is that there's this weird intersection of politics and the quote unquote just follow the science stuff. So what's funny is in that appearance with Dr. Fauci, sometimes there's good Dr. Fauci who's speaking purely on the subjects what he's really great at, which is science related topics. Mm-hmm. And then there's bad Dr. Fauci who gets a little too much into the politics. And I think what we just saw was good Dr. Fauci in the sense that there are states that have brought teachers back, have pursued this course. And it seems that from what we understand, it has not led to significant outbreaks. It's been something that could be done properly and safely. And that's an important data point. At the same time, though, and this is why I appreciate your comments, Crystal, from the perspective of just being relatively in the middle on this, which is, look, there are communities and there are people, especially in blue states, who actually don't want to have their children sent back to school. So this is one of those cases where I'll sound remotely conservative for this show and say, hey, we have a federalized system. So different states could take different approaches and different communities could take different approaches. And once again, to dunk on the culture war stuff, the part that's frustrating here is that people are trying to make these very localized issues into a really tough, let's make this all about a Fox News or MSNBC hit, when it should be about, to Michael's point, how can we support teachers? How can we support communities? And this is why the broader stimulus package is really important.
Yeah, and Michael, it's interesting to your point. I was just looking at this New York Times story, I read it this morning, how even vaccination, though, may not be enough. So this is part of where it might actually be, and as Marshall's point, there are a lot of people who still are afraid. And so it might even be more of a public health campaign. It says Oregon is vaccinating teachers, and it might not be enough to reopen schools because many of the communities there still don't want to send their kids back to school. I will still acknowledge that there is actually an organic backlash against school closing. So it's a tricky situation here for many policymakers as they're trying to go through this.
It is. And, a lot of members of Congress especially are going to have to look at their district because let's be honest about it. There are a big sector of kids, especially in public school, who get their meals specifically from going to school every day.
That's right.
And, have safe environments during the day because they're in school. So this is a really complicated thing that we're going to have to grapple with both on a national and a state and local sector. But I think you also pointed out a really interesting point. People there's a sector of the country that's reticent to get vaccines. And so we've got to figure out a way to educate those people and ease those fears, because at the end of the day, we will never get back up and running as long as there isn't, herd immunity. And so in terms of the vaccine, in terms of people coming together and figuring out some type of collective good, we've got to do that or the country will never move forward.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Gentlemen, thank you both so much. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. Coming up, Joe Biden officially shot down plans to cancel up to $50,000 in student debt. Brianna George-Gay, she's going to discuss Biden's reasoning when Rising continues.